If you go to yeah. Okay.
Okay, we're good with that. All right, here we go. All right, welcome to Shift is Happening. I am so thrilled to have a guest today, Franco Romero. He is a wonderful friend, the author of Closet Spiritualist, best-selling author. He's also a spiritual teacher, and he has an extraordinary life story as he has been guided from a very young age all through his life. And he's going to share a little bit of that story today. So, Franco, thank you so much for being with us today.
Hi, it's such a pleasure to be your first guest, I believe.
Yes, you are.
So I get a little ribbon for that, I'm sure
Yeah,
somewhere, right?
it's coming in the mail. It'll get there soon.
Thank you for having me on your show.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for being here. So I want to start with an overview of your life experience because you've had an extraordinary near-death experience and other guidance throughout your life. And I want the audience to hear that, but I also want the audience to understand that you've told that story a lot of times on a lot of different podcasts and videos. So I don't want you to go into full detail because I know that my listeners, my viewers will find they'll go out and look for those to find all the detail. I want to focus our conversation a little bit, but I do want you to give an overview of how you've had that guidance throughout your life.
Sure. So, everybody that I've come across um, so far has a story to
Mhm.
tell. And sometimes people view their story necessarily like wild enough to share,
Mhm.
but I find that I find that whatever you describe as wild is wild. I mean, really, if it impacts you, if it did something for you, it's your story. And so, um, I my story, my story, I try to minimize it most of my life.
Mhm.
It was my sincere effort to try to sort of live a normal life. Um,
Yes.
and so normal is a big question or a big word to question because what is normal?
Mhm.
And this day and age, it's really even more difficult to define that in any way that makes sense to most people.
Mhm.
But in any event, I try to do it. I spend a good sizable part of my life trying to normalize my life in terms of what I was experiencing. And for me, it was a bit different. I understand that most people don't necessarily have a set of circumstances like mine, but my near death experience, as you know, happened at a very young age, and wasn't even one yet, and I didn't even know I had one. I didn't even know I had a near death experience
Right.
until I was in my mid teens. And by that time, I had already had a rather unusual life, even though I thought it was normal. And
Mhm.
what I was experiencing for almost half of that time in my life was I had lived in a hauntings, and so my life consisted of paranormal activity,
Mhm.
which I thought in some way, shape, or form was normal. I thought
Wow.
I felt like more people experience paranormal things, but it was, I mean, sure, there was an element of it that didn't feel normal when you had babysitters running out of your house because they couldn't be in there for more than an hour, and doors are slamming and windows are opening, and I mean,
Like,
okay, those kind of things, should have been a trigger, should have given me a clue that there was something more than just normal about it. But anyway, those events had come and gone already in my life by at least a few years, and then by the time I hit 15, which is already a time in your life where you're trying to sort things out anyway, as a
yeah.
teenager,
Yeah.
um, I just felt just incredibly detached from everything.
Mhm.
Um, and it's really interesting because I'm actually sharing with you things that I've never had I've never been asked before. I've never been
Mhm.
asked to really explain sort of what was going on in my life at that time. I just kind of brushed through over it and said, okay, so
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
15, I started to have visions and I started to have dreams and I started to remember and what I was remembering was is that I had a near death experience
Yeah.
and and that the near death experience was a reoccurring vision or dream and I didn't understand what any of that was because back then nobody talked about near death experience. There wasn't that term
Wow.
didn't even exist yet.
That's right.
And so to share things like that was like, well, you might as well just, ask people to put you in a straitjacket at that moment and give you some medication and
Yep.
institutionalize you because that's exactly what most people had and still to some extent still go through.
Mhm.
It's becoming more common to talk about these things, but there's still a sizable number of people that still go through experiences somewhat like I did, or could have
Mhm.
gone if I had shared that kind of stuff. But in any event, those experiences gave me a different perspective
Mhm.
on this life, on
Yeah.
reality, or what we call reality. And and what it did was is that it enabled me to see that there's so much more that exists out there, even though I didn't necessarily know what out there meant either, or what this other
Right.
stuff was. But it just gave me a chance to see that um, what you see is not what is always real. What
Mhm.
you see is not. You can accept it and go along with it, or eventually it just starts to gnaw at you enough that you can't avoid it anymore.
Yeah.
You start to hear within yourself a lot of voices, not like oh voices like okay now he really should be committed. No, I mean like
Not schizophrenic
not
voices, right.
schizophrenic voices, but I
Right.
mean, you just start to hear the voice inside of you really trying to make its way out to
Mhm.
to share with you a perspective that you haven't been taught to see.
Yeah.
And so these paranormal events, the near death experience events, um, in particular, were things that by the time I was 15, it was just like on top of going through puberty and
Sounds terrible.
teenage years and stuff, it was like, um, you just did what you did. You just did what you did back then,
Yeah.
especially. You still do it to this day. You just do what you do.
Yeah.
Um, you kind of hide behind a facade, so to speak, because you
Yeah.
feel like you're like the outcast if you were to share that.
Yeah.
And so in any event, both the near-death experience and the paranormal experiences were things that I carried throughout my early adulthood and
Mhm.
after I got married. And but the thing was is that in my case, and I'm finding this to be the case with so many other people,
Mhm.
um, these events didn't go away in some way, shape, or form. They just wouldn't go away. And so
Mhm.
as you know from stories I've told you about, I've also had multiple events in my life where some more impactful in some sense than others, where I was able to kind of look behind the veil and see how this whole reality works, where you can stop time, and I mean you could literally stop time like in the movie,
Mhm. Mhm.
where everybody doesn't move and
And we're
there's
gonna
no
get into that story
yeah.
specifically because
Yeah,
it's been a
so we'll talk about that, but these in the book that I wrote, The Closet Spiritualist, it chronicles some of that experience. I wrote it so that people could see that I was just in many ways like them. I
Mhm.
was trying to sort out what it meant to live in this world
Mhm.
under conditions that were rather foreign to me, even though I was trying to abide by them, so to speak,
Mhm.
um, but never feeling like they made sense.
Yeah.
And 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 trying at the same time to live a productive life, a
Mhm.
normal life,
Mhm.
um, being I guess a human for one, two, a friend, a brother, a son, a husband, eventually a father, and and dealing with with what I eventually would call callings, kind of kind of the way that you see in some movies that they will refer to these kind of things as callings,
Mhm.
and having to try to juggle both of them was not easy because
Right.
again, no reference, no one to run to, nobody to talk to, nobody who could relate to it, nobody that could give me any kind of context. And then about well, throughout my life, I've had this beyond just my own voice, so to speak. I knew that um, I came to realize that I had also developed a communication with what other people would refer to as sort of the other side,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't really look at it that way. I didn't know what to look at this like, and this voice would come in and at my youngest years was it felt like just like a childhood type of imaginary friend. Uh,
Mhm.
and then as life went on and got older and I sort of disconnected from that, this sense of something inside of me that was trying to speak to me, and it wasn't something foreign. It was just an aspect of a higher consciousness that does this a lot to everybody.
Mhm.
We call it our intuition.
Yeah.
Was trying to come through, and over a series of years and some and resistance, um,
Yes.
I I eventually welcomed it, and it allowed itself to come through, and I began to channel, and
Mhm.
and it was like with anybody else it would have been. For most part, it was a process of trusting and having faith
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
yourself
Yeah.
to know that what was coming through was what it was. It was something really different,
Yeah.
and yet very, 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 very natural at the same time.
Uh,
So
Obviously
so
undeniable to you over time. Eventually
yeah,
undeniable.
there was some events there too that I talk about in the book that made it undeniable that this voice was really trying to come through, and if it couldn't come through me, it was going to do it through other ways with other people. But it doesn't have to be like that. And with most of the people that I've come across with, it's just, as I say, I call it the callings. It's just this, or this sense that something is reaching out to you. And I feel that so many people have this same experience now
Yeah.
in particular. And,
Yes.
and they don't know how to deal with it. They don't, it's not a dealing really. It's not about dealing with it as though it's something that should be in some way, shape, or form addressed because it needs to be cured. It's
Right.
actually it needs to be nurtured,
Yeah.
and bringing it out because what I would now call my events, those were like for other people spiritually transformative experiences,
Yes.
STEs,
Yes.
and but in the context of their day-to-day life, they don't know what that means, and they see it as very foreign, and they struggle with it.
Right.
And those all those things I went through as well. And I try to mention that in the book because I want people to relate to not just to me, but to relate to themselves.
Absolutely.
That if they're struggling with life, it's because they get it.
Mhm.
They get life.
Mhm.
They know what life is supposed to be like, and the struggle is that they've been told that what they how they feel about that is inherently inconsistent with the world they live in.
Yes.
And the irony is that the world that they live in as to what's inconsistent with life, not them.
Okay, I love how you just said that. I wanna summarize something, when you s as it happened to you, I see your experience as just a bit more of an extreme example to what's
Yes.
happening to all of us.
Yes.
Everybody has an inner guiding voice, that intuition that is their higher self trying to take them where they most long to grow into and become
Yes.
and realize that they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah, and so, and I know that you do a fair amount of this in what you do, your practice, your play that I like to refer to things like that now.
Yeah.
Um, your I've referred to you just before we got on that you're like a first responder for a lot of people, and it's important because there are a lot of people that let's just put it this way. Growing up, I knew that what I had, many people would either call it a curse or a gift.
Yeah.
Uh, but regardless of which one we looked at it or still look at it, I don't look at it as a curse, but I most definitely feel like and I don't even know if I would call it a gift because I'm really careful to say that everybody has this.
Yeah.
Um, everybody has this, and I know
Mm.
that back in the day, before I was really exploring this, when I was kind of tucking it under the closet, under the rug, or hiding it in the closet, or
Mhm.
hiding myself in the closet, I didn't, I didn't want to believe that I could have it. I didn't want to.
Yeah.
I didn't. I
Yes.
wasn't even sure what the implications of that would be to
Yes.
happen. So there was all sorts of doubts and insecurities and things that would come up with me. And this is again why I wrote the book, was to help people understand I didn't just pop up out of nowhere and became like this. For those, probably maybe many of who are listening here probably don't know much about as much about this or about me, but I didn't just pop up.
Right.
Okay, I
It's for
didn't just
sure.
I didn't just all of a sudden hit the social media waves or whatever and write a book and all this, and that there wasn't this quest that I call it, or journey,
Yeah.
of self-discovery, of self-actualization. I didn't just it's a process.
Yeah. A lifelong
And
process. Yeah.
it can be for many
Mhm.
people. And
Mhm.
but that process, up until very recently, would have, and still today, I shouldn't say up until very recently, still today would cause anyone to feel alienated,
Mhm.
and feel that they are the ones that need to be um, fixed.
Right.
And in actuality, they're the ones that have, if you want to call it a gift, I call it,
Mhm.
and this is an old term, but it still applies very
Mhm.
much.
Mhm.
They have the shine.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
they they have the shine, and they don't know it. And even still today, they feel uh, outcasted by it, and whatever that means to them. It doesn't mean that anyone is really outcasting them, but they themselves
Yes.
have self-inflicted that on themselves, because they're
Yes.
struggling with it, and these things are just, they're not going to go away. And that's the thing that I really need to, and when a lot of the stuff that I talk about, and is that it's not going away. The feeling that you don't necessarily fit in, or that you can't make sense of the world, especially and I'm going to say this, it's anybody now. It really is.
Yeah.
I get emails from people, and I'm not exaggerating because I just got one the other day, from a beautiful soul who's 96 years old.
Mhm.
Um, and one who the youngest was early teens.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
they're they're looking for something. They're feeling into
Yes.
something,
Yes.
and there's no place to go, because even even in the circles, even in what, let's call it, the spiritual circles, the new
Mhm.
age circles. I'm not even sure what it's called these
Yeah.
days, but
Yeah.
and I'm in it. I still don't know what it's called. And people, they don't even know how to put a word to it. And I always tell them,
Yep.
the reason you struggle with putting a label on it or putting a word to it is because you're trying to describe something that doesn't exist here.
Sure.
And
Yes.
so there are very few places that you can go and very few people really, even in the spiritual circles, where you can really explain what you're going through.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
and that's why I admire what you're doing in your work, because
Thank
you're
you.
trying to give them that bridge into this.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, I wanna, bridge the gap of how you and I came together a little bit because something that you said, you were 15 when you started having the these awarenesses and this
Yeah.
strange and I was 15 when I
Oh,
picked up Raymond Moody's book.
do I know this? I should I have known
You
this?
don't know this. You don't know this.
Wow. Wow.
I was 15 when I picked up Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life. And that was the first time that NDE's term was coined. He coined that phrase, and I was 15 and nobody was talking about it. And no 15-year-old was reading a book like that.
Yeah,
So
no 15.
there was my shine going, I can't quite stand it here in some ways. I
I
something
understand.
is
Yeah, we
something is wrong. What is it? I need to know more. So I picked up that book then and have been studying near death experiences for 35 years since, 36 years. And so that's so many stories.
you're like an expert.
I am, but then I heard your story. And after the thousands of stories I've read, heard, listened to, and the paradigm shift that it gave me in my own reality, when I heard your story, you were the only one where I was like, I need to talk to that guy. And you happened to say on that podcast that you were at that time working with individuals. And I immediately reached out to you, and that's how we met. But the common thread is that same feeling of something's not right. And where do I talk about this with? And who gets it? Who can I talk to that gets it? And like you
Yeah,
said, many of our listeners are just feeling that now. And
yeah,
they've maybe never told anyone, never even their spouse, their best friend, that they're not sure how to talk about it. So
yeah,
exactly right that I want to be a place where they can, those feelings are real. They're the most real and deep intuition, highest self talking to them. And that's what you're saying is that's the voice that is the most real voice, but it has so much to have to wrestle with as we're walking around having to pay bills and, all the things we have to do.
Well, and see, this is the thing that is changing,
Mhm.
because um, because in the time, and there was a whole different set of circumstances, and I would say that this is applicable even today, but the kids in particular, and I'm really careful, because I don't want to just say it's the kids, but there's a sizable percentage of them
Mhm.
that um that that are not they're not wired to endorse
Yes.
the messages that we have endured with.
Yes.
And so
I agree.
it creates a huge disconnect
Mhm.
between it could create a huge disconnect between them and their peers, as well as them and their families, um,
Absolutely.
because their parents um, were in an era came from an era, and I don't care if, I mean, I'm talking about parents that could be in their late 30s or early 40s. Okay, I mean,
Yep.
this is how
Fast things are changing.
fast things. Thank you. This is how fast things are changing.
Yep.
Is that in other for other people that say, well, that's not that long. I mean, the age difference and the time difference isn't that long, and I'm a little bit older than that,
Mhm.
and and yet it's still the same thing. There was a clear divide that began, and I talk a little bit about this in my book, about how things started to drastically change in the as early as around the year 2000, just prior to that, just a little bit
Mhm.
before that,
Mhm.
and then energetically, if you want to go with it, and I'm assuming that most of your audience will understand this to some extent, or at least feel
Sure.
into it. There was a shift in consciousness. It was subtle,
Mhm.
but that energetic difference is what allowed these new kids to come,
Mhm.
um, and to assimilate themselves somewhat naturally into this environment. In the past, they came in, but they were really quite obviously different. They were called indigo children, and this wasn't the frequencies weren't adaptable for for them, so they stood out quite a
Uh-huh.
bit.
Mhm.
And they were beautifully gifted, quote unquote, gifted. But again, these were just natural abilities that they had.
Mhm.
With these kids that came in, say like from about 1998, 99 till the present, they're different. Many of them still seem to or feel like they are very much adaptable to this world.
Mhm.
You know, I only shake my head because why
Mhm.
would you want to be adaptable to a world that is? And I'm not saying this in a critical sense. It's if our measurement of adaptability is based on a world that has no sense of itself, then what chance do these kids have
Right.
of knowing who they are? And so, but there's a fair number of them, a very large, very large percentage of them that that almost have this built-in ability to sort of disconnect from things that are happening in this broader sense because they haven't been swallowed up, if you will, by the conditions that tell us that we're supposed to be adopting by then
Mhm.
in order to make it in life.
Yeah.
Um, these kids are not wired that way. And then on the extreme side of that are the kids who have been given labels earlier in their life with ADHD, or even adults now, to some younger and older adults with ADHD and autism and stuff. And I have to explain, and it's starting to get through that
Mhm.
these aren't people that have deficiencies.
Right.
These are people that have gifts, and
Mhm.
that we're misunderstanding what what they are. Uh,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
because of the misunderstanding and labeling that we're giving them, they're they're being forced into trying to adapt to our ways in even harsher with harsher remedies because they're either being medicated or they're trying to be um, especially with say autism, they're trying to be normalized um,
Yeah.
when they can't
When
be.
they right. Let me ask you a question, Franco. Is I sense these things too so deeply, and I am passionately dedicated to teens and their parents because of this exact thing. Do you feel that what's happening is the old systems don't work for this new generation, and they know it. Inside their intuition, they know it. It's not going to be the how it was for their parents. It's not going to be the world that we grew up in, and if we try to make them grow into what adapts to that world, it won't work, and part of them knows that. Do you feel that
Yeah,
that's what's going on?
yeah, actually, and I'm glad that you know how I love, and this is a little ticky tack thing, but you know how I love when you use the word feel instead of think.
Yes.
Um, because it's really a small example of where this where and it fits appropriately with even the subject we're talking about, which we weren't sure where this was all going to go, and it's like I love that it's going here.
Yeah. An
It
adventure.
just it just went naturally to where it was supposed to go.
Yeah.
But yeah, to answer your question, yes, it gets into a bigger picture of things, and as you know, part of what has sort of spawned interest in some of the things that I do is because I also receive a lot of prophecies,
Yeah.
and so um, my prophecies have to do with this time period and where humanity is going in the very short distant future, like not 500 or whatever.
Yes, and
And
we will
so to
definitely get into
so
that.
so what what you're asking is a very, very powerful question because um, these children absolutely know that the ways that we have conducted our lives, the the institutions,
Mhm,
the social construct that I refer to in the book,
mhm.
um, they're they don't work. Um, I mean, you want to go? I mean, I can very specifically go into any almost any field you want to talk about it in terms of
Right.
where it doesn't work in education, where doesn't it work
I
in
could we let's
finance,
talk
and
right. We could talk about all of them. I
we
would
could
love
talk
to go
about
to the
them.
education one because I left that world for these very reasons, but we
Yes,
don't
that's
we
right.
don't
You can of anybody, you can go toe to toe on all this with most people.
yeah.
And those institutions, the way that they have sort of shaped us into believing in us doesn't work anymore.
Mhm.
And I know that for most people who might just be tuning in to two people talking, they'll just maybe view it as just two people talking. Like, okay, so I mean, there's another conversation about the system and how it doesn't work. But I'm going to just tell you that because of the way that you know what I do,
Yeah.
um, I know that this is all part of the bigger picture of what's happening to humanity right now. And I know that these children, in particular, once they are going through the educational, let's call it, let's do the educational piece. Not
Okay.
here. They're not here to be educated in the way that they're being educated
No.
now. And some people have no choice to throw them into that kind of environment, or they agree with that kind of environment. I am just telling you that there's a much bigger paradigm shift that is coming.
Coming. Mhm.
And you know, I don't have to call it shifts, right? You're saying the shift is,
Happening. It's happening.
it's happening, right? So I mean,
Yep.
I didn't mean to do that intentionally because your
I
program's,
know.
but the shift, it is here, and it isn't going to support the old paradigms that are here. That, as you know, and I in other circles, I'd talk about these frequencies of the divine masculine and feminine, but I'll keep it to very layman terms here just for now. These are not shifts that are just bouncing around somewhere in woo-woo land, as some people might describe them. These are real shifts, and they're starting to show themselves. And I could point to just even if you like the current environment of the political scene right now, if you want to see how these are playing out, these are happening. And these old paradigms, even the ones that their parents were raised in,
Mhm.
they don't work. I'm not
That's
even
right.
saying that they need some fixing. They
They
don't
they need
work.
overhauling. Yeah, they just they don't
They don't
yeah.
work. Just like for years I've been talking about the way that the financial institutions
Mhm.
are not sustainable in any way, shape, or form
Yep.
in the decade to come. It's just they're not sustainable. And then we hear people say the environment's not sustainable. And blah, blah. I am telling you, we have gone. There was a time when we could talk about sustainability of any of these institutions.
Right. That time has passed.
The time's passed. We're not talking about there, although you might hear some people talk about sustainability and how we can correct things and in the current structure that we have.
Mhm.
No, we've gone way beyond that. And the ones who are getting it, the ones who feel it, really truly genuinely feel it, are the ones that currently right now have no real sense of direction as to where to turn
Right.
because
Right.
the people, the very people, and I write about this a little bit in the book, the very people that they looked up to that for that guidance, they're
Mhm.
realizing without even knowing or saying it or wanting to
Mhm.
say it, they're lost. They're just as
Yeah.
lost, if not, they're more lost than the ones who are the younger people or the ones who are waking up.
Yes.
This could be at any age. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
this is what I try to keep telling people, that the ones who are figuring it out, and they're not the ones. These are not the same people that are pointing fingers at other people and saying you're the problem.
Right.
Because
No.
there's that sense, even with those people, there's a sense that they feel something is innately changing, but they're still looking at it as if the problem and the solution exists in the old systems that
Right.
they're trying to change. And that's been the delusional piece of this whole story for the last, well, I mean, hundreds of years. But in
Yeah.
recent times, the way that even this whole thing is played out in this country now is starting to really show itself, right? And
Yes.
and there's no solution in the way that it's happening right now. And the ones who are feeling it,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
calling, aren't approaching things. It's they're sitting back and going, "What is going on with
Uh-huh.
everything?"
Yeah.
So
So go ahead.
no, that's it. That was my long
Okay.
answer to your question. That yeah,
Okay.
the institutions are not are failing, and
Right. And
they're failing because they can't sustain itself in the new energies that are here.
right, and you say new energies, and I wanna just go right into that because the shift that is happening with the here's how I wanna describe it and define it, and I want you to fine tune it for me.
Okay.
My absolute awareness is that we the shift that is happening is we have to now it is time now for us to live inside out, not the other way around. It is not
Yeah.
to join those institutions to improve them on the outside and make them better. It's an inner quest, as you call it,
Yeah.
and it is time for all of us to go inside and do our inner work with our using our consciousness, our spirit, and even our psychology, cleaning out what might be in the way. All in my model, all three of those pieces, when they are loved, nurtured, and given space and attention, all we really ever need to do now is the inner work. All we ever have to focus on is what's here in me now, and
Yeah.
get better at assessing all of those pieces of us that are playing a role and grow into the entity that is the leader of all of that, taking us to where our own inner guidance system is trying to tell us to go.
Yeah.
And it's an upward spiral that if once we begin to follow those voices, like yours were a lot louder than the average person's, but when we start to know that that is coming inside of us for a reason, it knows better than anything. And we start to
Yes.
follow it above all else, above popularity, above public opinion, above anything, it'll
Yep.
take us everywhere and it will accelerate. It accelerates once you start following it. Now, that in my opinion, and with everything it has shown me, is the quest that we're on that will give us everything we need to move into this new way of being. So now,
We're
what do you
done.
think of that,
Bye-bye.
Franco? Nope. Play with that. Tell me, pick it apart, add to it, do what you
No,
do
I
with it.
feel like we should just wrap it up right here.
Oh, I did it well. Huh? Good. I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, so, the, there's a transitional period, and unlike, what some other people are talking about, depending on who's listening and what their sort of their flavor of the month or flavor is of choice, um there's a transitional period, but the transitional period, as I've been talking to many in in different conversations, is not it's not here for us to again, I refer to everything as playing. So
Mhm,
we're not playing in this space for a long time.
mhm.
We're not going to spend the next hundreds of years figuring out how to mold ourselves into a better society. That's
Right,
not now, for some people who are listening to this, this might be a big stretch for them, but
right.
I'm just going to introduce this at least for them to chew on it
Yeah.
and do whatever they desire with it. Um, the reason why you so accurately call your show "The Shift is Happening" is because it's happening, and the shift isn't just what you see on the surface. In fact, what I have said, and most people would agree with this in at least in the spiritual circles, is that what you see on the surface is always going to be at the end of a much greater shift that is happening. It's always I shouldn't say
Mhm.
at the end, but it's always the last thing that changes. Okay,
Mhm.
starts to change or feel the effect because it takes a sizable amount of shifting in ourselves, both
Yes.
individually and as a as a community of consciousness. So here's where I'm just going to give people a sense of how this plays out. Okay,
Wonderful. Wonderful.
um, we're unbeknownst to us, we've been told to accept this idea that we're separate. And to some extent, that separate individuality is what makes us us. But there is an underlying piece to us that is always and forever connected to each other.
Mhm.
We feel, even in the spiritual circles, that we feel that that connection has been severed, or in especially through religion, how it's been taught in certain religions, especially. But that connection has never been severed, and it's not about a connection to the higher self, like some divinity above us that is doing something and overseeing. It's it's a connection of remembering who we are, of who
Yes.
we are as divinity, and that some people would poo-poo that or woo-woo that, depending on the perspective of they're coming from.
Mhm.
But it's the realization that, and you and I can go into 100 different directions with this, but it's the realization that you're here, that here's the one thing that near death experiences do, or that others who have, or that those who have had the experiences, like the experiencers like myself,
Mhm.
the one thing that they can't, they just can't, they wouldn't want to shake it off, but they just can't anyway if they tried.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I've had conversations or interviews about this with other people about many of the near death experiences. I mean, you've been studying it for 30 some years, okay?
Yep.
But most of those people claim that they come here to come back from their
Mhm.
experiences because they
Mhm.
had some unsettled business,
Yes.
something that they needed to take care of.
Yep.
And for most of them, when they come back, they associate that unsettled business with what they left behind, unfinished.
Yeah.
But it has nothing to do with that. Although
Mm.
that is admirable and beautiful, and if they make they make good with whatever it was that they didn't have a chance to do before they had that brush with death,
Uh-huh.
they do it, and that's great.
Mhm.
And most of them have themselves forgotten, even in the experience of the near death, that they were shown who they really are,
Yeah.
who they are, and what this whole reality is about. And they don't remember a lot of that until, like, I've had many conversations with them where just the conversations with them activate the remembrances of things that happened inside the near death that they haven't shared with other people before, not even
Right.
to
Right.
themselves.
Mhm.
But the whole point in all of this is to say that what they do remember is that we are truly divine beings. I
Yeah.
mean, that we are truly intelligent beings capable of insane, insane amount of of power. I don't want to use power, but of intelligence that we have no idea what we're capable of yet. And
Yeah.
I know there've been some of those, maybe many in your audience and some of the audience that might be watching from friends that have watched other interviews with me, but I may have not said it enough that this is what the shift is about. This is what I've been going around
Yeah.
doing a lot of interviews with people, and they keep asking me, what is it? You keep saying that 25 is going to be the year of the reveal. Just as I
Mhm.
said a year ago, 2024 would be crazy, and that it would be crazy because in some ways a lot of the internal chaos that we're going through is finally going to surface, and it's going to make what's happening on the surface look beyond beyond nuts.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
my favorite saying now is "cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs." So
Uh-huh.
I'm giving Cocoa Puffs, like, I guess, a boost or something, I don't know, and I didn't even like Cocoa Puffs growing up, so it wasn't my favorite cereal, but nevertheless, people are going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs,
Mhm.
um, because it doesn't even make sense anymore. It
Right.
just doesn't make sense
Right.
to either side, no matter which side you're
That's
looking at
right.
it from.
That's right.
But so as I said that and things are coming to fruition in that arena, I said that 2025 would be a huge reveal. And so
Mhm.
everybody asks me, well, does that mean that all these government conspiracies are going to come to light? Possibly. I mean, there are a lot of conspiracies, but
Mhm.
most of them are not real, and some of them are, and but it doesn't really matter. But
Mhm.
that's not the reveal.
Right.
Some people ask me if we're finally going to really truly get experiences, close encounter experiences with ETs, yes, that's right around the corner. That's right around the corner. It's already happening in many people's lives.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
I
yeah.
I I I I have many students who are doing that on a daily now, and they show me pictures. Okay,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
so just in case they need validation, which I don't need to have them validate, they show me
Right.
pictures.
It's becoming pretty
It's pretty common.
common now to
Yes,
it's becoming now more rare to think for
the
people
other
who
way around.
the other way around. People who don't
Yeah.
believe that that's going on is now the people in the tinfoil hats.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, and that wasn't that long ago. It
No.
was just 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. This is how rapidly that shifting happens, and it's
Yeah.
so smooth in a way that you don't see it happening. So,
Mhm.
the point in all of this is a long-winded way of saying that what the reveal is that we start to truly start to have those inner moments, those inner quests, those inner recognitions, that the intuition, the gut feeling, the things that you were told not to listen to, uh,
Mhm.
the voice inside of you, that the reveal is that those that awareness is just too great to recognize it as anything other than who you really are. That it's that
Mhm.
becomes more natural to
Yeah.
you
Yes.
than anything that the social conditions or institutions or constructs can teach you. And
Right.
if you're like millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, that's the other thing, is that it is gonna start to happen, like, in
In
huge
mass.
waves now.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've been around studying this, but in other circles of spirituality, if you look at just what's happened in the last couple of years,
Mhm.
okay, just in the last couple of years,
Mhm.
there's been a seismic uptick in terms of
Oh,
people looking
absolutely.
for solutions to their life, not just
Yes.
curiosity questions about what might exist outside of this world or outside of this life in terms of life or death, but
Mhm.
the people who are generally looking inwardly
Yeah.
for answers, because and looking to other people to help them with that, because
Yes.
they don't they don't feel that the outer answers are it anymore.
That's
And
right.
and and
Absolutely.
and that's the big reveal. That's the big reveal, that in 2025, there is going to be a overwhelming frequency
Mhm.
that will activate people in a
Yeah.
way, and most of your mainstream scientists won't talk about it this way, but the cutting edge ones, the ones that are
Yeah.
looking at spaces of medicine like neuroplasticity,
Yeah.
or in science like astrophysics or new
Noetic sciences. Yeah.
yes, they will tell you they will tell you that this is a process of evolution of in our own genetic structure that is
Yes.
ready to happen. That the day of us understanding that only that we most people don't even know that we operate on literally less than 3% of our genetic coding.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's it.
Everything else has been called junk DNA as if it's
Everything.
just hanging out doing nothing.
And even before I even came to understand who I am, and who we are, way back when I heard that was the term that that so-called experts were calling the genetic structure of our biological bodies junk.
Mhm. I know.
Made me realize they don't get it. I mean, I didn't know. I
Right?
personally I wasn't in a position to say what they didn't get, but I just
Right.
when I
You felt that it was not
it
right.
wasn't right. That
Yep.
same feeling is what's bubbling up to the surface. That same feeling right now for most people is being translated in frustration and
Yeah.
anger and
Mhm.
fear,
Yeah.
and they're
Desperation.
and desperation,
Mhm.
and they're looking outwardly to others either for solution, or for the or for the blame,
Yeah.
and that shift. Remember what I said? Everything on the surface is usually the last piece
Yeah.
that handles.
Yes.
It's like in medicine, at least in
Mhm.
some aspects of medicine today. They're starting to understand that when you have a disease, okay,
Mhm.
there was a lot of, excuse my French, a lot of shit that was going on before that disease surfaced on, and a
Right.
lot of it was emotional, a lot of it was mental.
Oh,
Most
yeah.
of it is emotional and mental. It wasn't,
Yes.
and those were the pieces that we were told to discard out of the equation.
That's
And
right. That's
and
right.
so we would created pharmaceuticals to address the symptoms, because the symptoms were void of the two things that were really important, which was the
Oh,
emotional and the mental. And
yes.
so and those pieces do involve the spiritual, however you wanna define it, because it's our self-identity that is at play here, and we
Yes.
don't have an answer for that, and so we get these huge disconnects of not just with the society, but with ourselves, and that
Mhm.
gets translated into disease in our body. No different there than the disease that is happening all over the world, and how we point outwardly to the disease, to this dysfunction of our world based on other people's behavior or other. We don't understand that it all starts and ends with us
Yes.
individually.
Yes.
Individually. And you know this from other discussions that I could get into, but there is a real reason why you have to be as and some people often point out that that Gandhi shouldn't be somebody to necessarily revere. I don't revere Gandhi. I revere the message. Okay.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
revere the message. The
Right.
message is that you have to be the change.
That's
Just like
it.
Yeshua said, it's you, the kingdom of heaven is in you. And like Buddha said the same, Buddha said similar things, and Taoism say the similar things, and Hinduism say the similar things. If you go to the
Yes.
crux of what the message is,
100%. And
it all,
so many people like you and me and others who have studied that and applied it and found out that, wow, lo and behold, something massively changes in here. I'm not who I was a year
you're not
ago,
even
2
close
years.
to
I'm
who.
not even close, and it's
No,
accelerating. I know that it's accelerating the amount of energy I have, aliveness, joy. I'm fearless. I'm truly fearless now. So to study, apply those truths, and find out that your own self will show you that you are made to evolve and grow into something you did not know you could be. All we have to do is apply and find out. It's very
yeah,
simple.
it's very, very simple, but yet very difficult at the same time, because we have allowed ourselves to believe in a story that other people created for us. Oh no, no, I
That's
created
right.
my story. I'm the one that chooses this, that, or what have you. But I said, no, no, it's not that you don't. You certainly you certainly you create from the story that other people have given you,
Right.
but you nevertheless, you use the story that they've given you and that they can continue to give you to shape you into who you believe you are. But when you are, like you said, genuinely willing to be authentically, some people would call it vulnerable. I call it authentic.
Yeah.
Okay. It
Yes.
depends on how you want to look at it. If
Yeah.
you're genuinely authentic to yourself, you will change not only in your life, but yes, you will see the changes in your world. And
That's
there's a
right.
lot of quantum physics and
Yes.
other types of physics that I can go into to
Mhm.
explain this. So for those people who need a sort of an analytical,
Right.
scientific approach to this, so that they
Yeah.
can feel comfortable understanding that going inside of you, there's there's a whole awareness of who you are that only up until recently the near death experiencers had privy to. And
Yeah.
that's why they came back. They
Yeah.
came back to share that story. They don't know it yet, and they do it through their own story, but they they're coming back to tell people who they really are,
Yes. Yes.
who you realize you are the moment you die and you disconnect from the body.
That's right.
But we're not here to do that. And the younger people in particular, the autistic ones, and all these others, that people that have disengaged or disconnected, or whether intentionally or not, or because of some diagnosis or not that they have, these are the people that, as these frequencies get higher, and this
Mhm.
is a measurable thing, by the way, for again, for anyone who needs analytical
Yeah.
affirmation of
Data.
this, the the
Mhm.
the the consciousness of our planet has been a a basis of scientific research for decades now, and
Mhm.
there are measurements, instruments
Yep.
that are actually measuring frequencies on this planet, and have been for several decades now,
Mhm.
and the spikes that are occurring in
Occurring.
the last decade, in the last half decade, have been nothing short of seismic.
Yeah.
And those spikes continue to get bigger and become more frequent because
Mhm.
humanity is now getting to that point. And so these younger people, and I'm going to just, because your focus is, and your passion is primarily in that realm, and it crosses two generations between younger and
Yeah.
older people.
Mhm.
Um, but this could apply to anybody. It could apply to
Yeah.
anybody.
Oh, for sure, for
Okay.
sure.
But the younger people in particular, they came here already wired. Just, the analogy we could draw is how they're so adept to new technology. Okay, but what I will say, for the even for the older people, the kids, the older kids, I
Mhm.
refer to them, okay, because that's how I feel. I'm a kid,
Mhm.
and you know
Mhm.
that from just knowing
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
okay, that we're adept at something even greater that even the younger kids are still not aware of yet, but will soon come to be aware of how to do things from a technology standpoint without having to read manuals. Well, see, the kids don't read manuals anymore. They don't
Mhm.
need manuals. They'll just play with stuff. So they're already in that evolutionary process of, like, instructions are not needed in
Uh-huh.
everything.
Uh-huh.
The
Right.
older generations, okay, and I don't mean like 80s, 70s, 60s, or 50s. I'm
Right.
talking about even 30s or 40s.
Yeah.
They're more adept at a point now where one day, as they evolve in consciousness, they're just they're besides the fact that they're not going to be inclined to use manuals, they're just going to know how to create, just
Mhm.
communicate
Mhm.
and create through their minds. And
Mhm.
that's what my second book is about, it, which is the alchemistic part, the modern
Mhm.
day alchemist. And
Yeah.
and this is understood in many circles of science, whether it be telepathy or teleporting or whatever, or astroplaning or whatever. This is where we're going with consciousness, and it's right around the corner. And these younger kids were wired for that, but the older ones were too. They just have a little bit more shit that they have to go
Yeah.
through
Mhm.
themselves in order to find it, because they spent so many decades having to hear everybody else's delusions of what they're supposed to be.
Well said. Really well said. And you spoke to that earlier, that we have, to get there, to keep evolving up this spiral, is we have to shed the old stories. That was that was conditioning we took on to gain an identity at a time. But now we're in the process of shedding that and
Yeah.
remembering. All the spiritual teachers say, we are remembering.
Remember, it's remembering. There's no That's a great point, and thank you for bringing it up, because it is at the crux of my teachings. And I say teachings, but I teach people to remember,
Yes.
not teach them
Yes.
because they have something to learn.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
We don't have any learning to do. We've always
Mhm.
known who we are. We just simply allowed, for the purposes of being in this reality. And again, this is for a whole different discussion. We chose to allow that identity to be shaped by the social conditions of what
That's right.
we went into, born
Mhm.
into.
That's right.
And so, ironically, um, I've had these conversations with some people about how um, how someone could get brainwashed into
Uh-huh.
believing these ideas of who they might be,
Mm.
and ironically, they don't know that they are themselves the brainwashed.
Brainwashed. Yes, that's right.
Because they have been told to believe that they are who they are, and they bought it and they accept it in one way, shape, or form. And anyone who tries to question that has
Mhm.
to be either emotionally, mentally, or otherwise disturbed or sick or
Mhm.
brainwashed. And in
Right.
actuality,
It's exactly the other way around.
it's exactly the other way around.
Yeah.
So
Well,
this is the big reveal in 2025. This is going to be the tidal wave of people over and over, all over. One of my
yep.
favorite movies is a movie called Tomorrowland, because
Mhm.
in without giving away the crux of the movie, it's about people from all walks of life. I don't care who you are. I really, it doesn't matter, poor or rich or black or white or whatever.
Mhm.
One day the switch gets turned on.
Uh-huh.
And maybe that day already came, and it's already been years, if not decades, of struggle, of
Mhm.
trying to fit into a place and not understanding why you can't fit in,
Yeah.
because it
It's
wasn't you that had to fit in.
right.
You
Right.
were the one that got it. I'm gonna
Yes.
just tell you a really quick story, because I know we were supposed to talk about a lot of other stories, but I'm gonna tell you one that I feel is really relevant here.
Okay, great.
I had a student, who shared with me, that when he had an awakening, a
Mhm.
realization of an awareness of
Uh-huh.
something greater that was happening in him.
Yep.
It was so massive, and it was so hard for him to cope with, that he decided, and he's a was a relatively speaking, a very successful professional,
Mhm.
okay, in the
Yep.
medical field,
Okay.
okay?
Mhm.
Okay. He was well established, okay?
Okay.
And he decided to admit himself,
Wow.
because he didn't know what was happening to him. So he
Uh-huh.
decided to admit himself, and he spent, I believe, I may be I may be lengthening this more than it should be, but it was somewhere around 6 months he spent
Okay. Wow.
institutionalized.
Okay.
And he told me, this, and he came to me a year or so after he had been institutionalized. He said that the I said, "Well, what was it like to be in there, knowing what you knew?" Because what he admitted himself for were about things that see, like autistic children would not talk about right now, because they understand that most people, including their own parents, have no earthly idea
Uh-huh.
of what they're saying. And I've
Mhm.
worked with a fair number of autistic children,
I know
and
you
when I
have.
go
Yeah.
into their language and their frequencies, the world that they talk to me about is a world that I understand, because it's a world that is
It's
here in the
here.
shift, hasn't
Yeah.
come yet to most people. And
Mhm.
so they are just buying their time for that opportunity to reveal themselves.
Mhm.
And when
Wow.
they do, people are gonna be stunned at who they truly are,
Yeah.
okay? But in the moment, they just view them as being somewhat challenged or deficient in some way. So, okay, so he said that in the 6th month, the time period that he was in there, he realized that the people who were medicating him were the ones that were truly delusional, truly
Yes.
insane. That the ones that he found that were really there, that got it, that got
Yeah.
what he was saying,
Yeah.
were many of the same people that were being admitted into these institutions. He said that he had multiple events where they would just sit around and talk about the truth of who they are.
Oh my
And
gosh.
nobody, but they had to do it, they did it in seclusion, in rooms where, because the staff who were medicating them were the ones that
Wow.
didn't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes complete sense, actually.
It
I
does.
in my own inner circle, I know 2 people in my own circle of people I know that have been institutionalized in the last 6 months,
Mm.
which doesn't surprise me. I sense
No.
there will be more because they're
Well,
experiencing
if
what
it
they
it
are not lining up with this world and not knowing what
and
to do with it.
because they don't, up until now, they're still feeling that the answer is within the conditions that the so-called normal world has laid out for them. And that
Yes.
doesn't make sense for them. And if they're not institutionalizing themselves, they're choosing to exit
Yeah.
because
Yes.
they don't care to be here anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
But
that's
your
why you, but
But your message about what is coming, this shift that is happening, this is what's so beautiful. It's a very hopeful message. It is
yes,
not, yes, things are going to have to crumble and fall apart that aren't working. There may be some of that happening, but because of this emerging evolution of humanity, that is nothing but beautiful and hopeful.
yep,
And I love that all of my listeners got to hear you really go into that and define that because it's true. It is true. If we pay attention to what we're experiencing and with how we're connecting with the people around us, we notice there's a massive difference between those experiences and what's happening on TV or what they're talking about out there. They don't line up.
yeah.
People do connect deeply and seek to understand each other and are filled with love. So why are we getting a projected world that's completely different than, it makes one question. So
It makes
you're
one question, and just to put a bow on this conversation for this time, um,
Yeah,
it gives us a beautiful way to say to be continued.
that's right.
Because there are reasons for all of what you just said and and explanations and all that line up with what's happening here now, and more importantly, with what's happening with many of the people that you see in your
Yep.
practice, and many of the people that cross my world and my path too.
Yeah,
It's not just a it's not just a message of hope. It's a message of faith, and we were going to talk about the steps
I
of faith.
know.
I
I
know,
really
right? And
want to.
then
Can we do this again, Franco? I know how busy you are.
yes, we will do it again, I promise,
Oh, thank you.
because
Because we have a lot to talk about.
we do have a lot to talk about, and the message with to leave everybody in this is that, and I do mean it, is that the time has come. It has come. And I said this, I remember one of my first big interviews that I did, closer to 2 years ago now, and I said to people that the time is coming, and
Mhm.
that coming would be very, very, very soon, like
Yeah.
within a year or two. And
Hmm.
now, almost 2 years later, the time has come for
Yeah.
people to see who they truly are. And
Yes.
when they do see themselves, it's not going to be like, I'm going to just tell you right now, as you know from what you've done with people, it's extraordinarily confusing at first. But, but if you allow, and you said this early on, and I can't remember within what context, if you allow yourself, allow and accept that the
Yes.
changes that are happening, the way that you're feeling, emotional changes, whether it's depression or fear or anxiety or whatever, they're there because they're trying to tell you that what you're feeling inside in terms of your disconnection, your
Hmm.
inability, if you will, to sustain your own existence in this world,
Hmm.
it's happening because your time has come. Your time has come to accept who you are, and this is part
Hmm.
of what was meant by the end of where we are at this time, whether you want to look at it in terms of biblical scriptures or whatever, but it's a misunderstanding. Your time has come.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there have been many, many great teachers who have talked about this, that we have been waiting
Yeah.
for something to happen. And the
Yeah.
waiting is over because what we've been waiting for is ourselves.
Thus.
Yeah.
Oh, so such a beautiful way to end such a wonderful conversation, Franco. I'm so thrilled that you joined us. Thank
Thank you.
you. And I can't wait to continue. We'll work that out and get that on the calendar. I'm going to hold you to your promise.
Okay, you got it. All right.
Awesome. You're a blessing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.